Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's really good to have you here with us.
Good to be here.
We have a fascinating, and I have to say, a very different stack of research to get through today.
Yes, very different.
Usually when we sit down to record these, we're looking at things designed to make your life, faster, easier, more efficient.
Right. Productivity hacks, tech trends.
Exactly. History lessons that explain why the world is the way it is.
Yeah.
But today, we are doing something completely different.
I think completely different is the right way to put it.
I would almost call this an anti-efficiency deep dive. Because looking at the source material we have today, it feels like we're reading a manual on how to dismantle the very things we spend most of our lives building up.
That is a very, very accurate way to frame it. It's a demolition manual for the self.
A demolition manual. I like that. So we're diving into the spiritual guide by Miguel de Molinos. Specifically, we're zooming in on chapters 20 and 21. And I have to say, reading through the excerpts and the analysis we have, this is intense stuff. This isn't the kind of, gentle mindfulness you find on a meditation app with rain sounds in the background. It feels more like reading a safety warning on a high-voltage electrical box.
It definitely carries a voltage. And for context, for anyone who isn't familiar, Molinos was a 17th century mystic.
Right.
He was the figurehead of a movement called Quietism, which eventually got him into a lot of trouble with the religious authorities of his time. So he isn't writing to make you a well-adjusted member of society.
No, not at all.
He isn't interested in stress reduction or, helping you cope with your 9 to 5. He is interested in a total structural renovation of the human personality.
And that renovation process is what we're here to unpack. Because if you look at the self-help section of a bookstore today or just scroll through social media for 5 minutes, the message is incredibly consistent.
Oh, absolutely.
It's all about how do I avoid pain? How do I cut out toxic people? How do I find my bliss and stay in a state of comfort? I mean, we are biologically and culturally hardwired to seek safety and avoid discomfort.
It's the biological imperative, right? Survival usually means safety, comfort, and the absence of conflict.
Exactly. But Molinos, he looks at that instinct, that desperate need to run away from pain, and basically says, no, you're doing it all wrong.
Completely wrong.
He suggests that the things we're running from are actually the only things that can help us.
He argues that the very things we try to avoid, suffering, internal torture, dryness, difficult people, are not obstacles to our peace. They are the vehicle to it.
Which is a terrifying premise, if we're being honest.
It is.
It sounds completely backwards. But our mission today is to understand why he thinks that. We're going to look at his 2 roads to a cleansed soul, his really radical definition of love, and this fascinating concept he calls the monster of self-love.
It's a deep and, frankly, a challenging journey.
It really is. So let's start at the beginning. In chapter 20, he lays out the map.
He does, and he keeps the map deceptively simple. He posits that there are exactly 2 ways, and only 2 ways, to cleanse the soul and reach what he calls the center.
The center. So that's his term for total internal peace.
Yeah.
That connection with the divine.
That's it. The still point in the turning world. And he says there are only 2 paths to get there.
He doesn't offer a third option.
No.
No shortcuts.
No shortcuts, just 2 roads. The first road is the road of tribulation.
Which he describes with some very heavy language. I mean, he uses words like pressure, suffering, and this one jumped out at me, internal torture.
Yes, internal torture. It's a jarring phrase.
It really is. Now, when I hear internal torture, my immediate reaction is to say, okay, surely he doesn't mean we should go out and look for that.
Mm-hmm.
Is he suggesting a sort of masochism here? Like, my life is too happy, let me go, walk on some Lego bricks.
Well, and that is a common misconception with this kind of severe mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
Molinos isn't saying you need to manufacture suffering.
Oh.
He isn't saying you need to go out and create problems for yourself. He's operating from the assumption that the human condition guarantees suffering.
So you don't need to look for it.
You don't need to look for it. It will find you. Everyone will face grief, betrayal, illness, failure, spiritual doubt. It's coming.
So it's inevitable.
It is inevitable.
Yeah.
The question Molinos asks is not how do I avoid this, but how do I use this?
Oh.
When the suffering arrives, when the grief hits, or the betrayal happens, or that depression sets in, do you drug it, distract it, and run from it? Or do you walk the road?
So it's about resource management. It's about using the pain rather than wasting it.
Precisely. And then you have the second road.
Right.
The road of the burning fire of love.
Okay, now instinctively, if you present those 2 options to anyone, door A is internal torture, door B is burning fire of love, Everyone is taking door B. I'm taking door B.
Of course, you would think so. It sounds much more pleasant. But Molinos adds a caveat here that changes the entire landscape.
Okay.
He notes that these roads aren't parallel tracks that never touch.
They intersect.
They merge. And he makes a very bold claim. He says that true knowledge of the divine, the really deep, transformative experience of truth, only comes from the road of suffering.
Wait. Only from suffering. So even if I pick the love road, I'm eventually going to end up in the suffering lane.
Yes, because he argues that suffering is the real proof of love. It is the stress test.
Okay, unpack that a little.
Well, it's easy to say you love the divine or even to love a person when the sun's shining and everything is going your way, right?
Right. It's easy to be faithful when you're blessed.
Exactly. But can you love? Can you remain connected when everything is stripped away, when the internal torture starts? Molinos says that until you have loved through the suffering, you haven't really loved at all. You've just enjoyed a transaction.
Wow, so there is no bypass.
There is no bypass. Both roads lead through the same difficult territory.
That is a tough pill to swallow. But let's try to unpack this first road, the alchemy of suffering. Because I think for a modern listener, we need a really good reason to buy into this. Why would anyone sign up for a philosophy that frames hardship as a benefit? Molinos lays out a benefits package, but it's not exactly, 401k matching and dental.
No, the benefits are entirely regarding the internal architecture of the soul. He's talking about structural integrity.
Okay, so what's the first benefit?
First, he says it produces patience. But again, we need to define that. We usually think of patience as just waiting without complaining.
Right, like waiting for the microwave to ding or waiting in traffic. I am patiently waiting for my latte.
Right, but that's a very superficial patience. Molinos is talking about endurance. Think of a bridge. You don't know how much weight a bridge can hold until you drive a heavy truck over it. Suffering is the truck. It produces a soul that doesn't collapse under gravity. It thickens the walls of the spirit. It's not about waiting. It's about holding.
So it's about resilience. It's about being able to withstand more pressure.
It's deeper than resilience. Resilience implies you bounce back to where you were. This suggests you become something different, stronger, fundamentally changed.
That makes sense. That leads into the second benefit, which I found really interesting. He says suffering forces burning prayer.
Yes. Burning prayer. It's a fantastic term.
I circled that in my notes. How is that different from, say, regular prayer or just, thinking positive thoughts?
Well, think about your own life. When things are going well, the bills are paid, family is healthy, work is easy. How do you reflect? How do you pray if you do?
Honestly, it's probably pretty casual. It's a check-in. Thanks for the food. Hope tomorrow's good. It's polite.
It is polite. It's rote. It's practically a form letter.
Yeah.
You're engaging with the concept of the divine, but you aren't really leaning on it because you don't need to.
No, I'm standing on my own 2 feet just fine.
Exactly. But when you are in tribulation, when you get the bad diagnosis or the relationship falls apart or you're in that internal torture, what happens to the politeness?
It evaporates. You get desperate.
You get real. You scream. You beg. You are fully present in the moment because the pain anchors you there. That is burning prayer. It burns away the facade.
The pretense is gone.
Completely. Molinos says that one moment of that kind of desperate honesty is worth 1,000 hours of polite mumbling.
It forces authenticity. You can't fake it when you're in the fire.
Exactly. It strips the mask. It transforms the vessel from earthly to heavenly. From simple clay to, say, porcelain or something even stronger. It's a transmutation.
So it's not just about cleaning the pot. It's about changing what the pot is made of.
Precisely. He says, suffering draws out divine qualities from within mercy, true humility, deep patience, things that were latent but couldn't come out without the pressure. It transforms the human nature into something that can actually merge with the divine.
Because it's no longer just clay.
Exactly. Without the heat of the kiln, the clay stays just clay. It stays mud.
That makes sense. Intellectually, I can see the logic. But emotionally, when you were the pot and you were in that kiln, you weren't thinking, oh, good, I'm being perfected.
No, not at all.
You were thinking, I am being destroyed. And more than that, it feels like you've been abandoned. That's the part that I think is the hardest.
And that feeling of abandonment is absolutely central to Molinos' argument. He knows that's how it feels. He addresses this illusion of abandonment head on.
It's the why me moment, or the where are you moment that everyone has when things go wrong.
Yes. And Molinos offers a very specific, very counterintuitive argument, he says. You are deceived.
Deceive.
He argues that the divine is actually closest to you during tribulation, even closer than during times of blessing and happiness.
That is so hard to grasp. When I'm happy, I feel blessed. I feel close to something good. When I'm miserable, I feel cursed and alone. But he flicks that entirely.
He uses a metaphor that I think is one of the strongest images in the text to explain this. He compares it to the sun and the clouds.
Okay, walk us through that.
So imagine a day where thick, dark clouds roll in, the sky turns gray, then black, maybe there's a storm. You cannot see the sun, you cannot feel the warmth on your skin. To your senses, to your perception, the sun has disappeared. It feels like it's gone.
It's cold, it's dark, the sun is not there.
But Molinos asks, has the sun moved? Has it lost a single degree of its heat? Has it stopped burning?
No, of course not. It's just blocked.
The reality of the sun is constant. The perception of the viewer is variable. Molinos says that in suffering, the clouds are the tribulation, the pain, the confusion. They are real. They block the feeling of warmth.
But the source of the warmth hasn't gone anywhere.
Exactly. But he goes a step further, and this is the hard part. He says the divine allows the clouds. It permits them.
Why? If the goal is connection, why block the signal? Why allow the user to feel abandoned?
To purify the receiver. And this brings us to this really tough concept of dryness.
Dryness, that sounds incredibly bleak.
It is bleak. He describes it as the state of feeling absolutely nothing spiritual. No joy, no comfort, no high, just silence, emptiness. And Lino says this is a gift.
A gift? How is feeling nothing a gift? That sounds like the definition of depression.
Because of addiction.
Addiction. Addiction to what?
Molinos suggests that most people who think they are seeking God are actually just seeking the feeling of God. They're addicted to the spiritual dopamine hit, the comfort, the emotional release, the warm fuzzies of a good meditation session or a powerful sermon.
Wow. So it's essentially saying, I'm not in love with the divine. I'm in love with how the divine makes me feel.
Exactly. It is self-love masquerading as piety. It's the ego saying, I feel good, therefore I am holy. By removing the feeling, by introducing dryness, the divine forces you to decide. Are you here for the candy or are you here for the relationship?
Is weaning the baby off the milk.
That's a perfect analogy. You stop crying for the milk of comfort and start eating the solid food of obedience and faith. He says the goal is to stop you from seeking your own pleasure, even spiritual pleasure, so you can focus solely on pleasing the divine.
So it shifts the focus from what I get to what I give.
Or even more, from what I feel to what I am.
That is a harsh lesson. It requires a level of maturity that, frankly, most of us probably don't have. But it sets the stage perfectly for the second path. We've talked about the road of tribulation. Now let's pivot to section 2, the fire of divine love. This is from chapter 21. Yes.
Now, normally when we transition to a topic like love, the music softens, the lighting gets warmer. But Molinos, he doesn't do soft.
No, he does not. He makes it very clear right from the start. He says this love is strong as death.
Strong as death. That is not a Valentine's card slogan.
No, it's a weapon. And he asks the question directly. Why is love like death? Because it has the power to kill.
Kill what?
To kill the self, the ego, what he calls the natural life. He views the natural human personality, our desires, our defenses, our need to be right, our need to be recognized, as something that needs to die for the spirit to live.
So the self is the obstacle.
The self is the entire obstacle, and divine love is the executioner.
So this isn't a love that coddles you and tells you you're perfect just the way you are. It's a love that dismantles you.
Precisely. It dismantles the false structure to build the real one. And he describes how this process starts. It begins with what he calls the beloved's call, or the small voice.
This is the voice from the inner chamber he talks about. Yes, it's a very small voice from the deepest part of the interior. And it isn't shouting at you, it's whispering. But the content of the whisper is devastating.
What does it say?
It reminds the listener of all the parts of their soul that are not yet under control. It's like a soft but intensely bright light that suddenly illuminates all the dust and the cobwebs in the corners you've been ignoring.
It shows you the mess.
It shows you the mess, and it creates an insatiable thirst to change. It's that nagging sense that I am not yet who I am supposed to be.
It's interesting because usually we think of hearing God as receiving comfort. You're doing great, keep it up. But Molinos says the authentic voice makes you realize how far you have to go.
And that realization creates the burning. It burns away the complacency. It isn't shame, though. That's a key distinction he makes.
Also so.
Shame makes you want to hide, makes you say, I'm a mess, I need to cover this up. This voice, he says, makes you want to be cleaned. It makes you say, I'm a mess, I need to get in the fire. It draws you forward, not backward.
Okay, so if this aggressive, dismantling love is the goal, how do we get there? I mean, does he give us a recipe?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at the list of ingredients for perfection in the text, and it is daunting.
It is a very steep list. He breaks down the components of perfection quite clearly. First, you have the cross, which is his term for suffering.
Okay.
Then, self-denial, which means abandoning your own will. Not just your bad desires, but your entire will.
But then he adds a condition. And I think this is the kicker. This is what makes it almost impossible.
Yes, the crucial condition, that both must be voluntary.
Volunteer.
You have to accept them willingly. It is not enough to suffer because you have no choice. Everyone suffers. The cleansed soul is the one who accepts the suffering, who embraces it as the necessary fire, who says yes to the kiln.
So if I'm suffering but I'm bitter about it, I'm wasting it, I'm failing the test.
According to Molinos, yes. Bitterness is a defense mechanism of the self. Acceptance is the death of the self.
And what are the other ingredients?
He lists obedience and humility as the other core ingredients. And finally, a low valuation of one's natural life.
A low valuation. That basically means getting over yourself.
In the most extreme way possible, it means you stop viewing your life as the main movie and everyone else as extras. You realize you are not the center of the universe. Your comfort, your reputation, your success, they become secondary to the main goal.
Okay, so we have the theory. Suffering purifies, love kills the ego. But what do we actually do? This brings us to section 3, the strategy of the inner chamber. Because Molinos gives some very specific and very weird advice on what to do when things get hard.
He does. And his advice is the exact opposite of our modern instinct. Our instinct is fix it, do something, talk it out, distract yourself, make a plan.
Right. I'm stressed, I'll go for a run, or I'm feeling spiritually dry, I'll read 3 more books, or I'm tempted, let me call a friend. Action.
Molinos says, stop. He advises retreating to the inner chamber, the deepest part of the spirit, and the action he prescribes is do nothing.
Do nothing.
Just gaze at the divine.
That sounds easy, but anyone who has ever tried to meditate for more than 30 seconds knows that doing nothing is the hardest thing in the world.
It is terrifying for the ego, because the ego validates itself by doing, I accomplished this, I solved that, I fixed this relationship. When you do nothing, when you just sit in the ocean of God's presence, as he calls it, the self starts to dissolve. It has no job. It has no function.
It gets bored and wanders off.
Or it starves. And Molinos argues that's the only time life becomes complete, when the self is gone.
It's like treading water versus floating. Treading water is exhausting, it's frantic, but you feel like you're doing something. Floating requires you to trust that the water will hold you up.
And for a control freak, which the ego is by its very nature, floating is a nightmare. It's total surrender.
This leads to this hierarchy he sets up between doing and suffering. And I want to dig into this because I think a lot of listeners, myself included, might struggle with this. We like doing. Doing feels productive. Doing feels good.
And Molinos acknowledges that. He's not saying it's bad. He says working for the divine, what he calls doing, is joyful. It feels great to volunteer, to help people, to achieve things for a good cause.
Sure.
But, and here's the sting, he labels this as the state of a beginner.
Ouch. So the super active, productive person who runs a charity and is always busy doing good deeds is spiritually a rookie.
In Molinos' view, yes, because doing often feeds the ego. Look at what I achieved. Look at how good I am. It's subtle, but the I is still central to the story.
And suffering, how does that work in this hierarchy?
Suffering is bearing what comes. It is passive in the sense that you aren't controlling the outcome, but it's deeply active in your acceptance. He says this is for those seeking perfection.
Because it starves the ego.
It starves the ego. His insight is sharp. A person willing to die to self is the one who can be perfected. Doing feeds the ego. Suffering starves it. There's nowhere to hide, nothing to claim credit for in pure suffering.
So, to put it in a modern context, the person who is bedridden with a chronic illness but accepts it with total silent surrender is, in this framework, spiritually ahead of the person running 1,000 charities but doing it with a sense of pride.
That is exactly the implication. It turns our entire value system upside down. We measure output. We measure action. Molinos measures capacity, the capacity to be empty of self.
Okay, speaking of value systems, let's bring this down to earth.
Yeah.
Because this all sounds very mystical and internal, but we have to deal with other people.
Right.
And other people are. Well, they're the worst sometimes. They are the ultimate test.
They really are.
Right. So section 4, the monster of self-love. This is where the rubber meets the road. Molinos introduces this antagonist, this villain called self-love.
Yes, and he warns that this villain is tricky. It's very smart. And he says it starts by attacking us through our reasoning and logic.
Logic. I thought logic was good. Logic is how I win arguments. It's how I prove I'm right.
And that's exactly why self-love uses it. Logic is a tool of the human mind. Molinos warns that reasoning and logic are just creations. He says the blessed way is to abandon your reasons.
Abandon my reasons.
Yes. Because usually your reasons are just well-constructed defenses for why you shouldn't have to suffer this indignity or why you're right and they're wrong.
No, that hits home. I shouldn't have to deal with this rude person because I clearly communicated my boundaries and they crossed them. That's logic.
Exactly. Perfect logic. And Molinos would say, abandon that. Believe that everything, even the unfair things, even the rude people, is permitted by the divine specifically to humble you.
So the rude neighbor isn't an accident. They are an assignment.
They are a customized tool sent to sand down your rough edges. And this leads to his analysis of interpersonal conflict. He says something incredibly blunt about this.
What's that?
He says, if you cannot stand your neighbor, the problem isn't the neighbor.
The problem is me.
The text says, you are the unbearable one. Because your lack of peace comes from your own inability to surrender, your own internal friction. If you were truly dead to self, the neighbor's noise or their annoying habit wouldn't touch you. It would pass right through you.
But what if I'm right? I mean, objectively right. What if the neighbor is objectively, demonstrably wrong? Molinos talks about the virtue trap here.
This is fascinating. He says, when a conflict ends, or even during it, we have this deep need to prove we were the virtuous one.
Oh, wait.
I kept my cool, or I quoted the rules correctly, or I used I
I
statements.
took the high road. We love saying that.
We love it. And Molinos calls this virtue cheap. He says, even if you quote scripture or the highest wisdom to support your side, if you are using it to defend yourself, you are wrong. The moment you defend self, you have stepped off the path of the cleansed soul.
It's the motive. If the motive is, look at me being good, it's not good.
That's the core of it. The motive is everything.
He describes this psychological mechanism, and honestly, reading it, it felt like he was reading my diary. He talks about how we handle admitting fault.
The self-justification loop, it's a killer.
Yeah. Walk us through that, because it's so recognizable.
So you do something wrong. Or maybe you just get accused of something. You might say, I'm sorry. You admit the fault superficially.
Okay, fine. I'm sorry I yelled.
But internally, what is happening? You are saying, I'm sorry I yelled, but I yelled because you were being impossible and I was tired and I'd asked you 3 times. And really, anyone would have yelled in that situation.
Right, the but, the gigantic
That but is the monster. Molinos describes self-love as a monster that returns to raise its price. You lowered your price by saying sorry, so the monster comes back to inflate your value again by explaining why you were actually justified. It undoes the humility instantly.
And he calls this, explaining this excuse-making, a machine.
A machine for manufacturing self-love. That is such a powerful and modern-sounding image. Every time you explain yourself, every time you make an excuse, you are feeding raw material into this factory that puffs up your ego.
You're just rebuilding the wall you just tried to tear down.
Exactly. You make a small crack of an apology, and then you spend the next 10 minutes spackling it over with justifications.
And the output of that factory is, it's pollution. He talks about judgment as a kind of spiritual pollution.
Yes. He says suspicion and judgment of neighbors stain the purity of the heart. And this is a binary state for Molinos. You cannot have inner peace and judgmental thoughts at the same time. They cannot coexist in the same space.
It's one or the other.
One or the other. If you're busy cataloging your neighbor's faults, your heart isn't at rest. It's at work. It's judging.
And he links this directly to caring what other people think of us.
Right. This is the final nail in the coffin for the ego. He says if you care about your reputation, what others think of you, you cannot be surrendered to the divine will.
Why that specific connection?
Because if you are surrendered, you don't care if people think you are a fool. You don't care if people think you are weak or wrong or even bad. You only care about the one thing. Your reputation is just another possession the ego wants to protect.
It's total indifference to the court of public opinion.
Which is the ultimate freedom, if you think about it. Imagine waking up and truly not caring if you were misunderstood or misjudged. But the price is your ego. You have to be willing to be a zero in the eyes of the world, to be a hero in the eyes of the divine.
Okay, so we've gone through the fire, we've fought the monster, we've dismantled the factory. What is the end game? Section 5, the ultimate goal, wackus. The quiet state. What does a person who has actually done this look like? What's the result?
Well, first, Molinos makes a comparison that I think puts everything in perspective. He compares character versus miracles.
Yeah, this jumped out at me. This is a wild statement.
It is. He says the divine cares more about the believer walking the inner path, this brutal path of suffering and dying to self, than about someone performing miracles. And he doesn't just mean small miracles. He explicitly mentions raising the dead.
That is huge. He's saying, I would rather you suffer quietly and kill your ego than have the power to bring people back to life.
Yes, and we have to ask why. Why would that be?
Yeah, why? Raising the dead seems pretty useful.
Because, historically and theoretically, miracles can coexist with ego. You can be a great wonder worker and still be arrogant. You can heal people and take the credit for it, even subtly. But inner death, the death of the self, cannot coexist with ego. It is the purest state. One is an action you do, the other is a state you become.
It's the difference between doing godlike things and having a godlike nature.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the result of this grueling process is a state of what I would call invincibility.
Invincibility.
He says, and this is a direct quote, "He who despises his own life is not easily hurt."
That's logic I can follow. You can't hurt a target that doesn't exist. If I don't care about my reputation, you can't insult me. If I don't care about my comfort, you can't make me miserable.
Precisely. If you have killed the part of you that craves validation and comfort, the world has no leverage over you. You are unbribable and unthreatenable. The promise is, if you possess the divine, you have everything. If you rely on the passing world for your happiness, you have nothing.
And he describes this final state as one where light and darkness have the same influence on you.
Yes, indifference.
Yeah.
But it's not apathy. It's not, I don't care about anything. It's a deep spiritual stability where a good day and a bad day are treated exactly the same. They're just wetter.
They're just external phenomena.
Exactly. The soul remains fixed on the divine, regardless of the storm or the sunshine outside. You become the eye of the hurricane, calm at the center no matter what rages around you.
It's incredible. It's also incredibly hard.
It is the hardest thing a human can do. It requires going against every single survival instinct we have.
So let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, a lot of very challenging ground.
We have. It's not light reading.
Not at all. We started with the two roads, tribulation and fire, and realized they often merge into one. We learned that suffering isn't an accident. It's alchemy. It's the kiln that turns the clay vessel into gold.
And we learned that the feeling of abandonment is an illusion, just a cloud hiding a sun that never moves. And that spiritual dryness is just a way to cure us of our addiction to good feelings.
Right. We then talked about the hierarchy of doing versus suffering, and how our modern obsession with productivity might actually be a spiritual trap that keeps us as beginners.
And we face the monster of self-love, realizing that our deep instinctual need to be right, our need to justify ourselves, is actually a machine that blocks our peace.
So the big takeaway here, if you had to distill all of this down into one thought, what would it be?
I think the big takeaway is a fundamental shift in perspective. Molinos invites the listener to view every annoyance, every pain, every rejection, and every unfair moment not as bad luck, but as a specifically designed tool.
The tool.
A tool to break the ego and allow something greater to take over. He is telling us to stop fighting the surgery and let the operation happen.
It's a call to total surrender.
Total unconditional surrender.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, something that really struck me while we were discussing that self-love machine.
Let's hear it.
The text suggests that your need to be right in an argument is actually a bigger barrier to your peace than the person you are arguing with. The argument itself isn't the problem. Your defense of your own rightness is. So here's the question for you to take into your week. If you stopped feeding that machine of self-love with excuses today, if in the next disagreement you have, you just stop defending yourself verbally and internally, what part of your personality would have to die? And more importantly, what would take its place?
That is
For more spiritual resources, visit lokaken.ai.